Right, so I'll get started. So like I said, if you've just joined, we are here to talk about AI-assisted engineering. This is really kind of what we at Audacia have observed in terms of rolling AI out to our engineering teams internally, and also kind of helping other companies do the same. You know, what have we seen that's worked, what hasn't worked? How can you kind of ensure success when you're doing this in your own organizations? So it's primarily aimed at kind of technology leaders, heads of engineering, CTOs, people like that, but also kind of software engineers, test engineers, you know, people actually on the ground, you know, doing the doing, kind of useful across the board, hopefully. So quick kind of overview of what we will be talking about. So we kind of see, you know, often rolling out any kind of big change management piece, but certainly when it comes to adopting AI within engineering, there are kind of three main kind of phases to think about. You need to make sure that you've got the right foundations in place. You can't just kind of give people licenses and off you go. Kind of, you've got to make sure that the foundational pieces, those building blocks, are there to ensure success. You've got to have a rollout of some kind. Obviously, you've got to kind of give people the tools, you've got to kind of give people the training that they need, and then it's not a kind of, you know, once and done kind of thing. You can't just do a rollout and then hope for the best. You've got to keep going with it. You've got to keep that communication up. You've got to continuously improve and try and build that culture of people who are really kind of passionate about using AI and using it in the best way possible. So I'll kind of talk through in more detail each of these phases. Hopefully enough for everyone to kind of take away some learning points and things that people can action in their own organisations. First of all, a bit of an intro to Audacia and to myself. So I'm Richard, I'm the technical director at Audacia. We're a 100-person technology consultancy based in Leeds. My role is as technical director is overseeing all of the work our technologists do across engineering, cloud, data, and AI. So that's from very kind of early stage pre-sales engagements, discovery phases, right through to our delivery and tech ops functions where we kind of do production support and cloud hosting. So very kind of broad remit, but one of the things that I'm responsible for is making sure that our engineers have the right tools to succeed in their roles. And obviously in the last few years, one of those core tool sets has been AI. So yeah, we spent a lot of time looking at how we can best utilize AI, so hoping to share some of that learning today. So as I mentioned at the start, there are kind of three main phases to this. There's the foundational pieces, that the rollout, and then there's the continuous improvement beyond that. So first of all, I'll talk about the foundations. So in terms of kind of governance and guardrails, what's really interesting is that there's been a lot of research done around how to most effectively adopt AI within organizations. And this is kind of beyond software. This is across any kind of organization. And one of the key learning points is that actually providing guardrails and governance is a really key indicator to strong AI adoption. So it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but often by you know, if you're an organization that has absolutely no governance at all, and no guardrails, you know, people can use whatever tool they like, they can use it for whatever purpose they like, you often get lower adoption of AI there because often by not providing any constraints, people are then just really nervous about and really unsure about how they can actually, you know, what they're allowed to do, what are the guardrails between which they're allowed to work. And by defining things like acceptable use policies, by actually providing some of those guardrails, that's what can often unlock adoption and innovation, because people understand their remit, they understand the kind of controls that are in place, and then they know that as long as they're within those guardrails, they can safely innovate and adopt AI as they see fit within their role. So by providing that overarching governance, by providing some kind of constraint, you actually do unlock a lot of innovation. And this is certainly what we've seen both within our data and in organisations that we've worked with. So something as simple as publishing an AI policy, something written down. So our AI policy there's two main aspects to it. One is defining the overarching principles that we must adhere to when we're using AI. These are things like accountability. The individual using the AI tool is still accountable for whatever output is being used. If you're a software engineer using some code that's been kind of generated by Claude Code or GitHub Copilot or something, you are still accountable for that code. You're still accountable for the quality of it to make sure that you've got unit tests to make sure that you're actually meeting the requirements that you're supposed to be fulfilling. Saying, "Oh, I didn't, get a Copilot generate that code. I didn't really understand what I was doing." That's not acceptable. So accountability is really key. Privacy and security are going to be really, really key. Making sure that you're using tools that have the right privacy controls in place, that you are, if you're building an LLM-enabled application, that you are doing the right kind of security testing on it. Transparency is really important. Things like flagging on pull requests when AI has been, used to generate a lot of the code can be really useful to help reviewers understand how they need to position their review. Is this largely AI-generated code? Maybe you're going to do a slightly different kind of review than if you know that a human being has written every line. So having a policy that kind of outlines those key high-level principles that as an organisation you're trying to adhere to, and also something around that kind of like, what is acceptable use? What are your approved AI tools? Making sure that people are using kind of properly licensed tools with the right privacy controls in place, with the right, things like IP indemnity policies in place. What are the terms of service? What are the retention policies that these tools have? Making sure that's all written down so there can be no ambiguity for anyone within your organisation around what they're allowed or not allowed to do. So once you remove that ambiguity, like I said, that's when you can kind of unlock a lot of creativity, a lot of innovation, and ultimately higher adoption. In terms of solid delivery foundations, so a couple of months ago there was the annual DORA report that was published by Google, and it was largely around AI-assisted engineering and how companies are adopting AI and the impact that is having on things like what's called DORA metrics, but kind of more broadly what impact it is having on the software engineering industry at large. One of the key takeaways from the DORA report was that AI serves as an amplifier. And what that means is that if you have really good practices in place, if you have, your work kind of flows through the pipeline really smoothly, you get good quality requirements, your code review kind of or pair programming processes are really good, your testing processes are really robust, you've got, really quick pipelines, you can get work throughout to customers really quickly. AI will amplify that. AI will generally make that even better. If you have poor processes, you've got single points of failure, you've got bottlenecks, guess what? AI is going to amplify that and make those kind of things even more pronounced. So making sure you've got those solid foundations in place is really, really important to make sure that you are amplifying the things that you want to amplify. A lot of these solid delivery foundations are what have been known to be good practice for many, many years. Small batch sizes, for example. Submitting small, committing often small pull requests, trying to reduce user stories down to kind of really, the smallest size. Trying to remove the kind of this like long-lived feature branches and troublesome kind of merge conflicts and things like that. So all of those things are really, really important. Unit testing, really, really important to make sure that if you're generating more code, if you're generating code faster, delivering more, that you know that code is working, you're not catching regression bugs and things like that. So a really comprehensive automated test suite, really important. It's also really important to recognize that, rolling out AI to speed up your software engineers, for example, that, software engineering is just one part of that overall delivery lifecycle. It's really kind of no point speeding up your software engineers if your bottlenecks are all elsewhere in the process. If your test environments aren't fit for purpose or requirements can't be defined fast enough. By speeding up developers, they're just going to be working even more inefficiently. They're going to be sat there waiting for requirements to be defined, or they're going to be working on the wrong thing. If you move them faster, if you move your engineers faster, you need to make sure that you're moving them faster in the right direction. So it's really, really key to get those foundational pieces in place when it comes to delivery, but also look at the whole development life cycle as a piece that potentially needs to be optimized, and not just kind of narrowing that focus on one part. So all of those foundations really serve to kind of, as far as your engineering team goes, as far as your broader software delivery team goes, kind of building trust in AI, making sure that people understand that what they are and aren't allowed to do. And putting those solid delivery foundations in place that are really a good idea to be done anyway. Another example of them that we've seen is, if AI is generating a lot of code for you, what kind of standards do you have in place for your code? Do you have coding standards? Are they written down? How can you inform the LLM what those coding standards are effectively? So the last thing you want to do is have get a Copilot, Claude Code, whatever it happens to be, generating an awful lot of code, and then the first thing your engineers have to do is almost like rewrite it or refactor it to fit your coding standards, because ultimately an LLM is going to generate content based on the training data and the context that it has. If your standards are not part of the LLM's context, then you're always going to be kind of fighting a losing battle there. So it's an opportunity to, if you haven't already, kind of write those standards down, like get them documented, and then B, the technologies now like MCP servers where you can augment an LLM with additional data and additional information at the point at which you're kind of interacting with that LLM. So we've kind of got MCP servers to kind of pull in our standards and to augment that within the context of that LLM window. So really, using it as an opportunity to bolster your standards, but also kind of help give the LLM a bit of a leg up in terms of what does good look like. It's really, really important. So all of those foundational pieces, ideally you want in place before you start any kind of rollout. That's not always feasible, so the two things can kind of happen in parallel, but there's certainly some minimum requirements that you want, that you really need to be looking at your overall software development lifecycle. You need to at least be informing people about what they are and aren't allowed to do before you start any kind of rollout. Which does lead nicely onto the rollout. So like any kind of change management piece, you've got to think more holistically about what does a rollout look like, what does success look like. I guess with AI, the most obvious thing that you can do is give people access to tools. You sign up to some GitHub Copilot licenses, for example. And that's good. Clearly, people need access to the right tools for the right job. I think talk to your engineers, talk about what tools will work well for them. Meet them where they're working. If your engineers are all kind of working in VS Code or something, then GitHub Copilot is often a really good example because there's such deep integration there. If your developer's tool set is something slightly different, then make sure you're giving them access to licenses that will work where they are spending most of their time, whether that's in an IDE, whether that's somewhere else. So choosing the right tools, and probably have right tools for your team, the right tool, it's not just an objective factual statement, the right tools for one team and not the right tools for another team. But choosing the right tools, focusing on that kind of data security side of things, making sure that the tools, like I mentioned before, the tools you're using have appropriate terms of service, have you know what their data retention policies are, what their privacy policies are. it's also important to note that the AI world is moving incredibly quickly. The right tool today is not going to be the right tool tomorrow. It's certainly not going to be the right tool in 6 months' time. So choosing the right tools is not a one-off decision that you make and then never look at again. Make sure you're aware of what new models are coming out, what new services are coming out built on top of those foundational models. It can be really, really useful to have almost like a set of benchmarks that you can use to evaluate tools. So whether there's a particular code base or application that you maintain that is actually really representative of the kind of work that you as an organization do, have a user story or a feature or something that you can implement on that representative code base such that OpenAI come up with a new model or something in a few months' time, or Cursor do a new release that's got some amazing new feature, or there's a new VS Code plugin that's released, that you can try it out in a way that you can actually kind of realistically benchmark against other tools, so that you can make sure that you are constantly kind of at the forefront of what the best tools are. Upskilling and training as well. Giving people access to tools is only one half of it. People need guidance on how best to use those tools. Whether it's prompt engineering or vibe coding or whatever you want to call it, as a software engineer, using AI is a skill in and of itself. The best software engineers aren't necessarily the best people at using AI for software engineering, and vice versa. So giving people upskilling in how best to use these tools, and making sure that training is balanced. You don't necessarily want people walking out of training thinking that AI is going to solve all of their problems and is going to be absolutely amazing, because there will be roadblocks, there will be things that it's not as good at, there will be times where you need to iterate or even break out that AI loop and do something else. And if people don't have that expectation going into it, then as soon as that happens, they become disillusioned, they become disengaged, and this is where a lot of the you tend to get these very polarized opinions online about AI. You get either the hype merchants saying it's amazing, it does everything, or you get people poo-pooing it, saying actually it's a load of rubbish, it's not going to be here in 6 months' time, and obviously the truth is somewhere in the middle. But by only having kind of the hype merchants creating all the noise, as soon as somebody hits a blocker, then they're going to be the other end of the spectrum saying, well, this hype is a load of rubbish. So you need to present it in a really balanced way and present success stories of like these are things that it's been really good at, but also areas where you need to be a bit more mindful of how you're using AI, and maybe areas where there is a little bit more work to do and where individuals do have to take on a little bit more, a little bit more onus on kind of, I guess, steering the AI in the right direction. But certainly that upskilling and training. We have a training program that we rolled out. Making sure it's kind of role specific is quite important. There's a lot of training that's going to be very general for the organization, but there'll be some things that you need to specifically kind of train your marketing team on, maybe, or your software engineers or your test engineers. So making sure that the training is not so generic that it doesn't really speak to anyone or anyone role individually. That you kind of, you're meeting people where they are. Is really, really important. So that's the kind of rollout. So you can deliver some upskilling within the space of a couple of weeks, maybe depending on the size of your organization. You can get the licenses, you get some budget approved, some licenses, and you roll it out, and then you could then say, all right, box ticked, we've got the licenses, we've delivered some training, surely everything is now just gonna work and everything's gonna be amazing. And obviously that's not necessarily going to happen. So as with any kind of change management piece, it can't be a one-off. You've got to then iterate on it. You've got to continuously improve. At the very least, you have new people joining your organisation who weren't around when you delivered the training. So you need some way of evolving that training and making sure that can be delivered on an ongoing basis. What I think is really, really important is that AI adoption isn't seen as a top-down mandate where the bosses are saying we've got to do this, so everyone just kind of, blindly follows along. You want to embed this culture, you want to build communities that are really passionate about this, and it's those communities that will drive things forward and will continuously improve how you're doing it. So whether you as an organisation have existing communities of practice, for example, or whether you have existing kind of online communities, Slack forums, Teams channels, however your organisation kind of meets and comes together and collaborates, try and build communities there. So within our DSU, we have a kind of tech community of practice that meets every month. Our test engineers have a similar forum that meet every month. We have online communities within teams, so building all of those things out, giving people a forum which they can share success stories, that they can share challenges, that they can ask questions. Really want to be in a kind of no stupid questions kind of space, because that's how everyone will learn from each other. Otherwise, you get into kind of knowledge silos, and people are experimenting, maybe doing really interesting and cool things, but nobody else knows what's happening. So you're not kind of moving forward as an organisation. You're just having very kind of localized kind of movements, rather than what you want to be doing, which is everyone pushing everyone else forward. So I mentioned kind of, that no stupid questions culture. So really encouraging that open discussion, and this is where really making sure you're not in a kind of top-down approach really helps as well. I've been around software engineering for 20 plus years, so I'm almost certainly not going to be as effective using these tools as somebody who's a couple of years into the job, because they are going to kind of grow into the industry as like an AI native. So making sure that the discussion is open to everybody, because this is so new, this is so fast moving, that everyone will have a really good opinion, everyone will have a valid opinion. You want to make sure that everyone is able to contribute. So really encouraging that open discussion, making sure that it's a safe space for people to share not just success stories, but also challenges. Where has it not worked for people? That can be as important as sharing stories of where things have worked. And I think in terms of that continuous improvement as well, there are definitely some kind of killer use cases for AI. There are some things it's incredibly good at, there are some things it's not as good at. Developing some of those use cases, we've seen a lot of success with things like legacy upgrades, for example, where if you're doing a fairly well-trodden upgrade path, you're upgrading from one version of Bootstrap to another, or one version of React to another, one version of .NET to another. Assuming that upgrade path is documented, the framework will have there'll be release notes of like, well, what are the breaking changes? There's potentially things documented within kind of online communities or within the actual framework's documentation itself about, if you're doing this upgrade, here's a step-by-step guide on how to do it. That can be a really powerful use of AI, where it can be fairly well specified what the outcome is. The steps to get there are also well documented, and it's generally a lot of kind of drudge work. So that can be a really, really useful thing to offload on something like an AI agent. I think also making sure that you're understanding where the boundaries are. Where do you still want to have some kind of manual intervention? How much, if you're developing some use cases to use AI agents, how much freedom, how much control do you want those agents to have? And where do you still need that human in the loop is really important to define up front. That kind of ties back to those acceptable use policies that I was talking about at the start. So I guess, as a recap, we've got those foundational pieces, building those solid foundations, making sure you've got some policies and guardrails in place, making sure that your overall delivery practices are solid, and that you this idea of AI serving as an amplifier, that you are really thinking about that and making sure that those foundational pieces are in place, making sure that you are documenting standards and allowing the LLM to access those standards can be really, really important just to improve the quality of what an LLM can generate. In terms of the rollout, give people licenses to the right tools, make sure those tools adhere to the policies and kind of governance guardrails that you've defined up front. Tell people how to use the tools as well, give them that upskilling training is really, really important. And then iterate, continuously improve. This is not a one and done thing. This is something that is evolving really quickly. You've got to build those communities and get everyone involved in that to really make the most success from this. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of where we've seen success, where we've seen other companies have success, where we've seen some issues. We've kind of obviously drawn on a lot of industry research as well. So I'm really interested to hear how other people have seen this rollout. So please do get in touch if you want to discuss further. We do have a couple of questions, so I'll answer those quickly. If anyone does have any other questions, please kind of pop them in the Q&A. So there's a question around there can be a view among software engineers, software testers that using AI is cheating or is somehow not something that should happen, that maybe a bit of a sense of guilt of, well, I shouldn't have used AI this much, I should have maybe done it myself or something. So how do we address this? What's my view on it? So that is definitely a real thing. I think in terms of how to address it, I think this is definitely where one of those foundational pieces can really be useful, which is to clarify what the company's position is on AI. So I can't remember exactly, but the opening paragraph of Audacia's AI policy says something along the lines of Audacia are an AI, I don't know if it's like AI first company or an AI embracing company, or there's some wording to make it really, really clear that first and foremost our position is that AI is a good thing and that AI is something that we want people to be using. We have, everyone has access, everyone within the company has access to a GitHub Copilot license. GitHub Copilot publishes metrics on use, so we can see kind of how many people are using GitHub Copilot, what those metrics are, and we can see those going up. In terms of, and this is where kind of those communities kind of come in. So if the community, it's one thing for me as a technical director to stand up and say AI is a really good thing, you should be using it. If the community is also saying that, if you've got local champions within each project, really saying how AI can be useful, really sharing their success stories, then if it becomes a part of the culture that this is just something that is done, that everyone does and embraces, then that can go a long way towards kind of reducing that sense of kind of guilt or shame as to whether people should be using AI, because you want people to be, it is a tool that everyone should be using. But I guess it's like 30 years ago when IDEs were kind of not as popular. Maybe people thought, well, if you're not in a basic text editor, then you're not a real developer kind of thing. So obviously things change. Now you would dream of not using more high-powered IDE because everyone recognises that it's just going to make you move faster. It's going to make you deliver more value to your end users, which is really what everyone should be driving for. So I've got a really good question from Harry about how we're using AI in other areas of Audacia, so marketing, sales, etc. So I would say that our marketing team have been like a real driver of using AI. Huge efficiencies that we've got within our marketing team. So whether it's, we will no doubt be kind of publishing a blog post based on AI enabled engineering. We've got all kinds of processes to kind of, convert, a talk to a blog post and things like that. Optimizing the process by which we can kind of, process sales leads and opportunities, all of those things are things that our kind of marketing and sales teams are looking at all the time. So I would say that the marketing team have been real trailblazers as far as AI is concerned, which is a really good position for us to be in as a company. We're really looking to have such a strong marketing team that is so kind of passionate about kind of new technologies, ways that they can just be more efficient, more effective. So another really good question from Tom about the regularity of reviewing processes for guardrails and acceptable use policies. How often do we review our kind of policies and governance around AI? It's a really good question. So I think AI is a little bit different to other things. So we, as a company, we're ISO 27001 accredited. So we have a number of policies and procedures. They are all reviewed regularly. That's kind of part of our ISO accreditation. I think Tom tried to point out that AI kind of stands alone because it's moving so fast. You can't just do an annual review of your AI policy. I would say that's probably not going to be often enough. What can be really effective is to have a group of people who are accountable for that AI policy. So maybe you have an AI governance team or an AI adoption team that you set up internally, and that team maybe just meets for an hour a month to talk about how is AI being used, and a part of the remit of that group would be to review any policies you have. So I think making it the responsibility of somebody or a group of people and having that regular kind of, I would say, monthly cadence to review how appropriate your policies are. Are you seeing any issues in the wild? Are you seeing inappropriate use? Are you seeing adoption of tools? This is really where it can kind of tie back to that continuous improvement as well. Ultimately, you need a group of people who are accountable for how AI is being adopted. And that could be an existing group, it could be a new group that you spin out. But I would say that's probably an appropriate place for that. And yeah, a monthly cadence is pretty good for AI. And then yes, something about kind of question around how we can support kind of top down to engage with AI. So I guess this is around how can we as an organization kind of support that kind of that engagement. We work with a lot of different companies on how to kind of adopt and engage with AI. You see some companies where it's being approached very top down, and you actually need to try and change the hearts and minds of the rest of the organization. You see some other companies where everyone's clamoring to use it, but there's a lot of resistance at high level. And it can work both ways. You really need to kind of, like I say, if it's a top-down approach and you start building out those communities, if you've already got that community-driven team and what you actually need is more buy-in or more work at the top, that's where we can go in and work with C-suites or leadership teams on that kind of AI strategy piece. So these are kind of engagements that our consultancy team regularly do to work on some high-level kind of AI strategy, AI adoption strategy. How can a company accelerate, be more efficient with AI? How could a company build AI within a product that they're maybe rolling out? It can kind of work both ways. You usually either got buy-in at one end or the other, but we definitely do. We see both, and we can definitely support both aspects there. So I think that is what I've got with in terms of questions. So I think I'll give people another minute. So whilst I'm giving people opportunity for questions, just a quick kind of shout out for our final tech talk of the year. So we'll have Luke Mitchell, one of our principal software engineers, talking about serverless architectures on Thursday, the 18th of December, same time. So please do sign up for that. The sign up link will be on our website. Please do sign up to that. It's going to be a really, really interesting talk. I'm looking forward to that one. If there's anything that you would like us to be talking about, or anything that you think we can be doing, send an email to talks@audacia.co.uk. It's always really interesting to hear from people about how you're kind of taking on board the kind of things that we're doing, anything else that we can be talking about going into 2026. I think that will be it for. One final question that's just come in. So it's around kind of concern about over dependence on AI tools. This is a very good question because yes, that would definitely be a concern. So one thing that I should have mentioned in terms of like the training and the upskilling that we deliver in terms of acceptable use policies. So when I was talking about governance at the very start, I said one of the key things in certainly in our AI policy is the idea of accountability, the idea that it's the individual that remains accountable for everything that they do. The one term that we talk about over and over and over and over and over again when it comes to using AI is critical thinking. That individuals must not lose that kind of critical thinking. Whether it's some content that's being generated for a blog post, whether it's some playwright test that's been generated from a test engineer, whether it's some AWS config that's been suggested by Claude or by ChatGPT, because the individual is still accountable for anything that happens. You've got to keep that kind of critical thinking. You've got to keep that sharpness to understand actually what is being suggested is right or is not right. You've got to do the due diligence, the fact checking on that. So AI can definitely be used as an accelerator. It cannot be used to replace the individual. So over-dependence is definitely something that is it's something to be mindful of, certainly. And this is where kind of tracking, I was talking about at the start about those solid delivery foundations. Tracking those metrics is really important. As you're adopting more and more AI, hopefully you're delivering more work, but hopefully your quality bar is at the very least remaining the same. You're not like shipping twice as much work, but quadrupling your defect rates, for example. Making sure that individuals are still delivering high quality work. But yeah, making sure that there'll always be novel problems to solve that AI can't necessarily help with. We can't become so over-dependent that we lose the ability to solve those novel problems. So yeah, it's something definitely to be wary of, to keep an eye on, but this is where we hammer on that kind of critical thinking and that accountability on the individual that is not going to go away. But yeah, good question. So I think that's it. I think I've answered all questions. So yeah, I'll just end it to say thank you very much for everyone for joining. Like I say, I look forward to seeing you in December for our final tech talk of the year. And yeah, please do get in touch with any kind of stories that you have around adopting AI in any way that we can help. More than happy to have a chat with people. Yeah, have a good rest of the day, everyone, and thanks very much.